Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So the webinar will start in about 2 minutes. And again, this is the webinar for the VW Mitigation Program for statewide funding for the combustion freighter marine and zero-emission Class A trucks. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so we are going to start the webinar. Before going into the presentation, some general housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and the actual presentation slides will be made available on our website by the end of next week. So if you like to take a look at the recording or if you need a copy of the slides, please do visit our website. And it will be at www.aqmd.gov/VW. Our website will be listed in the slide, and that will be shown in a little bit. Also, we will be taking questions at the end. You have the option to type in questions in the Q&A box that should be located on the bottom of your screen or the Zoom platform screen. Also, you can choose to raise hand and we will unmute you if that is your preference. Okay, and with that, so again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ping Gui, Program Supervisor in the Technology Advancement Office at the South Coast AQMD. And among other things, I lead the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Program, which we'll just simply call the VW program for short moving forward. So today's presentation is designed to give everyone an overview and some basic details about the statewide solicitation for the combustion freighter marine and zero-emission Class A truck categories of the VW program. Okay, to give some background, the VW program, or the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust, is the result of a settlement with Volkswagen for their illegal use of defeat devices in certain 2 and 3 liter VW diesel vehicles. And the VW trust funds are pretty much intended to mitigate the excess NOx emissions caused by VW's actions. So the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is the designated lead agency acting on the state's behalf as the beneficiary to implement California's allocation of the VW trust funds. And the CARB approved a beneficiary mitigation plan which identified the program criteria for the state and the 5 funding categories, which are shown in the pie chart. So these product categories are administered statewide by 3 different air districts, us, South Coast AQMD, San Joaquin APCD, and Bay Area AQMD. But today's focus for the webinar will be on the 2 funding categories administered by the South Coast AQMD, which again is the combustion freighter marine and zero-emission Class 8 trucks categories. So specifically regarding the solicitation that is currently open and accepting applications, approximately 109 million is released and available combined for the combustion freighter marine and zero emission Class 8 truck categories. And the application is first come, first served. And applicants can apply for multiple project units within one single application. As mentioned previously, the VW program is a statewide program. So therefore, basically is eligible to vehicle or equipment owners operating at least 75% of the time within the state of California. Applications are online only and can be accessed through our web-based application portal. So applicants are allowed to, but aren't required to have a consultant or third party assist them through the application process. The only caveat is that third parties cannot start or submit an application, and this was done by intent. The agreement term or contract term is 3 years from when the new vehicle or equipment is placed into service. And this next point is exceedingly important, and that is an applicant cannot take possession of any funded new equipment or start any work on a repower project until an agreement is executed. If there is no agreement or no contract, there is no obligation to fund. So in addition to the information that was just provided, the VW program does not have a fleet size limitation. That basically means that fleets of any size are eligible for funding, again, assuming the vehicles or equipment that are under application meet program requirements. Also, unlike previous solicitations, the current program announcement does not have an entity cap towards funding. And what this means is that one entity can apply for multiple vehicles or equipment to the limit that entity wishes to apply for. So if you had like 90 trucks, you could apply for 90 trucks. And also assuming there is still funding available. And lastly, before moving on to some program requirements, VW program funds can be used as match and can be stacked with other incentives, be they local, state, federal, or private, as long as no double counting of NOx emission reductions occur. As an example, for zero emission trucks, the VW program can be stacked with the HVIP program. And for rail, VW program funds can be stacked with the federal CRISI program. So this question is very common, and that is VW able to stack with Car Moyer? So the answer to that is only potentially on a case-by-case basis. And this is because Moyer also claims NOx reductions, so every case will be unique. And now for some general program requirements. Again, all funded vehicles or equipment must operate at least 75% of the time within the state of California. And this applies to both the existing equipment and the replacement or repowered equipment. But for the repowered or new equipment, the 75% is for the duration of the contract or the agreement. So existing and old equipment must be compliant with all applicable regulations, again, be they local, state, or federal, at the time of application, and must be available for inspection. There will be 3 types of inspections. So you have pre-inspections for the existing unit, post for the replacement or new unit, and of course the destruction for the existing units that are to be scrapped. And just as stated, VW program is a scrap and replace program. So the existing units must be scrapped. Okay, now moving on to the combustion freighter marine category. And this category actually funds trucks, switchers, and marine. So for trucks, eligible existing Class 7 and Class 8 vehicles need to have engines between model years of 1992 to 2012. And these are the model years that are set within the consent decrees or the court documents. For a non-government owned truck replacement project to a 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour truck or a low NOx CNG truck, the max amount of funding is either 25% of the cost of the vehicle, including taxes, or $102,000, whichever is less. So please do remember, funding will always be the max funding percentage or the max up to amount, whichever is less. And also something to note is that non-zero emission drayage trucks are no longer funded under the VW program, and this is due to the compliance requirements for drayage trucks under the ACF. Now for marine, the only eligible vessel types that are eligible for funding under this program are ferries, tugboats, and towboats. And the max funding for non-government entities is either 40% or 1.2 million per engine, whichever is less. The replacement technology needs to be Tier 4 or a hybrid system meeting Tier 4 NOx emission standards. And lastly, for this funding category, we have the freight switcher locomotive. You will notice that the max percentage for this equipment category does vary greatly, but the max up to amount is capped at 1.62 million. The max percentage will really depend on whether the replacement technology will be Tier 4 or zero emission, or if it will be like a full-on replacement or just a repower project. And next, we move on to the zero emission Class A truck category. Something to note is that this is actually a completely separate funding category. So when you are applying, if you're only interested in zero emission trucks as a replacement, you have to apply under this funding category. This category is pretty straightforward and only funds the replacement of Class 8 trucks to zero emission technology. And for non-government entities, the max amount of funding is either 75% or 240,000, again, whichever is less. So now that we've kind of gone over some of the program and funding details, we will quickly discuss the actual application process. The online application will ask for a variety of information and supporting documentation for the vehicle or equipment seeking funding. Examples of information required will include clean titles, vendor quotes, and usage data. Checklists for the application and supporting documentation needed are available again on our VW website. And it will be found under the resources page. So our VW website again is www.aqmd.gov/VW. So once an application is submitted, it will be assigned to a project officer who will evaluate the project for eligibility and completeness. The project officer will also calculate NOx emission reductions and determine the final award amount based on program criteria, as well as the vendor quotes that are provided in the application itself. So the project officer will also work on drafting the agreement or the contract, and the contract will have set requirements, such as milestone deadlines and annual reporting schedules, among other things. And once you have an executed agreement and you are moving forward with your project, towards the end, we move to invoicing and general record keeping. So the VW program is not a voucher program, so not a voucher program, meaning that payment is via reimbursement and only after an invoice package has already been submitted. There are required documentation for the invoice package, and those requirements are actually stated in the executed agreement or contract itself. Also, inspections will need to be completed, and vehicles or equipment placed into service prior to any invoice being paid. So a project officer will evaluate submitted invoice package application to make sure program requirements have been met and a complete invoice package has been submitted. However, as a reminder, the VW program agreement is for 3 years from when the equipment was placed into service. So all award recipients will need to submit annual reports per the term of the contract agreement, and all records do need to be maintained for at least 6 years. For any kind of additional information, please visit our website, again, at www.aqmd.gov/VW. Please also do take a look at the resources page of our website. There is a lot of useful information, such as program announcement, the program announcement itself, funding and eligibility tables, frequently asked questions, a guide for using a third party, and other helpful documents and links. And of course, feel free to reach out to us. Our team is available via phone or email, and this information is listed on this slide. So that pretty much concludes the presentation itself, and we will be moving on to questions. But again, before we move, I just wanted to remind everyone. So the presentation slides, as well as the video recording of this webinar, will be made available on our website before the end of next week or so. Okay, awesome. So we'll move on
we have about 7 questions.
Perfect.
So the first one is from James Richard, and his question is, can this funding be stacked with CARB HVIP dealer incentives?
So yes. So the VW program for zero-emission trucks can be stacked with HVIP. There will be a specific procedure for this, and we are currently working with CARB and HVIP to streamline the process.
And the next question is from Bretter, and the question is, can vouchers be obtained for leased vehicles as opposed to company-owned vehicles?
So regarding leased vehicles, because this is a scrap and replace program, we do require that actual owners apply to the program. However, these owners can be rental companies. So let's just say Penske is applying and they lease to, Jesse Conaway's trucking services. So Jesse Trucking Services wouldn't be able to apply, but Penske in this scenario would be able to apply.
Thank you. The next one is from Catherine Wirtz. The question is, what are the limitations to third-party consultants? Can they prepare applications?
So yes, so third party, taking a step back, there are 2 kinds of accounts for the application portal. There's an actual applicant account and there's a third party account. So both a third party and an applicant must have their own account to be able to get an application into us. What it is that the applicant can go in and just start an application. All they have to do is basically, select the dropdown of what category they're trying to get funding for, be it the combustion freight and marine or the zero emission Class A trucks, and then just put in that they are requesting for third party assistance. The third party must have an account because that email is the information that basically pops up. Like when an applicant looks for a third party, they are looking for the account that is already registered. And once that handshake happens, the third party basically has access to the entire application, minus being able to submit and basically signing the consent portion. So there is obviously a disclosure that the applicant must agree to. And of course, applications must be submitted by the actual applicant.
And next question again is from Kathleen Words. In all instances, would VW be stacked with HVIP? Don't both count NOx reductions?
So HVIP is more of a fleet expansion type of a program. To my understanding, they do not actually claim the NOx emissions that the way that VW would account for it. Due to this, we are able to stack HVIP with VW.
Next question is from an anonymous attendee. Would hydrogen ICE vehicles be eligible?
So if we're talking about hydrogen fuel cells, then yes. Basically, fuel cell technology is available as a funding opportunity under the zero emission category. So again, anything in the truck for zero emission is only funded under the zero emission Class A trucks category.
Okay. Next question is there funding for companies starting new operation in the state and needing new vehicles rather than replacing existing ones?
So again, the VW program is a scrap and replacement program. So you will have to scrap vehicles in order to be eligible for funding. If there are no vehicles to be scrapped, if you have no trucks to begin with, then these type of projects will not be able to move forward. Again, the VW program is not a fleet expansion program. The goal is to reduce NOx emissions, and the only way to permanently reduce emissions is to have the equipment or vehicle scrapped.
Anonymous attendee is asking, upon submission, how long until application review is completed and funds awarded or declined?
It's difficult to gauge how long it will take. It depends on when an application is submitted and how many applications are currently in the queue. So because this is a first come, first served type of solicitation, that information is basically a moving target. Also, in addition to that, even when an application is being evaluated by a project officer, oftentimes we require more information or clarification. And so there could be a back and forth process, which again, at the end of the day, depends on when you submit an application and how complete your application is.
Okay. Next question again is from anonymous attendee. Is there a list of trucks that have been approved as replacements, or what are the guidelines for replacements? I do understand that we need a vendor quote with application.
So the requirement for trucks under the combustion freight and marine category is that the truck must meet 0.02 grams per horsepower hour, which is pretty much right now in the market. You are looking for a low NOx CNG truck. What type of truck? It basically needs to meet the criteria of it's a freight truck. It could be a waste hauler, concrete mixer, or dump truck. Those are the specific categories for the vocation of the vehicle. For zero emission trucks though, HVIP website, it could be actually used as a resource because they will list all the trucks that are available out there in the market that have been certified by CARB and are zero emission. But for the CNG trucks, you could probably just ask the dealerships, go online, take a look to see what kind of equipment are out there and available. AQMD, we are brand neutral, so we don't look at what brand or what OEM is of the truck it is. It's just that it needs to meet that criteria of 0.02, and of course it has to be certified by CARB and legally operable in California.
Pierce is asking, are you able to give an update on remaining funds available since the opening of the application period?
So that information we will make available on a different website, which is the CaliforniaVWTrust.org website. And that website is actually available on our main page. So it's linked out. there is a results page, and that will give general information of how much funds are available. But again, everyone, please do remember, this is first come, first serve. So we oftentimes have applications for moving forward and withdrawing at the same time. So a lot of times numbers do fluctuate quite a bit.
Lisa with Tom Truck Center is asking, please explain the third party in more detail and the reimbursement steps and timeline for being paid in more detail.
So again, there is actually a document we have on our website for third parties. But again, in short, both the applicant themselves and third party must create an account. And once you do create an account, the applicant starts the application, they select their third party, and the third party can take over at that point, complete the application, upload all the documents. But once the third party is done with that, they do need to let the applicant know that that the applicant account must submit the actual application, because again, there are portions that are targeted specifically for the applicant, such as disclosures that they acknowledge, as well as signing the actual application. We cannot have third parties sign for an applicant, just like we can't have, contracts signed by a third party or a consultant. As for the reimbursement process, so the actual reimbursement process occurs again after the project has met the milestone criteria set within the contract or agreement itself. And the process is pretty much listed out. The required documentation is listed out in the actual agreement itself. So once you are awarded, please do take a look at that, because it'll tell you how to invoice. But basically what happens is you get an award. We assume that you're working towards getting the truck actually purchased or delivered. Again, don't take delivery of anything before an executed agreement. And then you ask us for inspections. So please do request inspections because of projects potentially withdrawing, we are not initiating inspections ahead of time. We're only initiating inspections when we know the actual award recipient is ready to move forward. So basically, when all 3 inspections are completed, the reports are in, and the applicant is ready to submit an invoice package, you can just email us the invoice package, tell us you're ready for invoicing, and we can proceed from there. Again, the timeline completely depends on the applicant. Right now, the contract in service is about a year from when the contract is executed. That deadline can potentially be extended. It really just depends on what is going on with the project itself. But we do want these projects to move forward because, again, the VW program does have liquidation deadlines, and we do need to meet those liquidation deadlines.
Anonymous attendee is asking, does freight mean drayage or any Class 8 tractor hauling goods around California qualify?
So the term drayage is very specific. For the combustion freight and marine category, drayage trucks specifically cannot be funded. However, freight trucks, any type of freight trucks hauling goods around California can apply. However, if you're going to replace with zero-emission technology and applying under the zero-emission Class 8 trucks category, both drayage and freight trucks are eligible for funding.
And anonymous attendee is asking, for zero-emissions Class 8 trucks, I see that funding of $90 million is available with AQMD. Is that the yearly limit? If so, for how many more years will this $90 million be available?
So right now, the funding that's released for both categories combined is approximately $109 million. Originally, $90 million was allocated for the entirety of the VW program for the zero-emission category. However, that is no longer completely accurate. Right now, what has happened is that we are combining potential funds for both funding categories, both the combustion and the zero emission, to make sure that funds are going to projects where there is more demand or more need. And again, this is not an annual release. This is the 109 million is for the entire program. So once that funding is exhausted, there may or may not be more funding moving forward for this particular program.
Okay, and the next question is from Lisa with Tom Truck Center. What is the definition of a third party, and what qualifies a third party? Please provide some examples.
Anybody could be a third party. Your brother could be a third party. And we've actually had that occur in the past. Family members could be third parties. An actual consultant could be a third party. A free organization could be a third party. There is no exact definition. It's basically someone who's assisting an actual applicant. So the thing with third parties is that they are not responsible for the actual contract and equipment itself. They're basically just assisting through the be it the application, the invoicing, or even the inspection process. So they're not held responsible, whereas an applicant is held responsible for everything that occurs within the actual application and within the actual contract.
Rose Johnson is asking, dealers apply for HVAP, so does that mean dealers would also assist with VW process?
That is completely up to the dealership itself. Because again, when you apply to the VW program and the HVIP program, they are completely separate programs. So dealers normally go through the HVIP process, and I do believe they apply on behalf of the applicant. However, this is not true of the VW program. An applicant wishing to stack for both programs will be required to apply separately to both programs. So a dealership may offer assistance, or they may not offer assistance. It's completely up to the dealership. However, if you do need assistance, our team is available to answer questions.
Jesse C is asking, as a trucking dealer, would the dealer be the applicant or would the end user be the applicant?
So again, the owners of the equipment need to be the applicant. So obviously a dealership is not going to be operating or owning these vehicles. So it would be the end user.
Okay, anonymous attendee is asking, is it up to the applicants to choose whether we want to replace or repower the unit?
Yes. It's completely up to the applicant how they wish to proceed. So again, the repower option is only available under the combustion freight and marine category. The VE Class A truck category is just straightforward replacement, and it is only for trucks.
Tom Folks asks, please clarify, does South Coast AQMD consider hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles zero emissions or not? The question wasn't about H2 fuel cell vehicles, but ICE vehicles, ICE.
Is it zero emission? And I suppose a follow-up question is potentially are these zero emission vehicles? And are they certified as zero emission? So Tom, if you can help us understand the question a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay. And Varga 9A is asking, how many applications have been completed and submitted to date?
There have been hundreds of applications for the VW program itself. Funding to date, I don't have that information off of the top of my head. Again, it is a moving target, so we have just contracted several more applications to move forward. But that information will again be available at the California vwtrust.org website that you can access through the aqmd.gov/VW website.
And Lisa with Tom's Truck Center is asking, are vendors listed? If so, where? And what is a vendor list?
There is no vendor list. So an applicant, again, Southwest AQMD is brand neutral. The applicant chooses the vendors or the dealers that they're looking for. They go to whomever that they wish to purchase for. The only thing is we just require that a vendor quote be provided for the actual equipment itself, so we have the ability to determine the award amount.
Jamie is asking, is there grant funding to replace natural gas vehicles with new natural gas vehicles for solid waste vehicles?
Yes. So for the combustion and for the zero emission category, the existing units do not need to be just diesel. They can be alternative fuel. However, obviously, the funding category that will apply to this particular question would be the combustion freighter marine, as that is the only category that funds to 0.02 CNG trucks.
Anonymous attendee is asking, are Class 8 drayage trucks eligible for funding for repower projects or only replacement?
So right now, as stated, the zero emission Class 8 trucks category is only available as replacement. So you can only do replacement. The ZE Class 8 trucks category doesn't have a repower option. It's just Class 8 trucks and it's just replacement.
Anonymous attendee is asking, are there restrictions on the vendor quote and purchase order dates? For example, does the quote have to be dated after a certain date? Do we have to wait until funding determination before issuing a purchase order?
So right now it is 90 days before application submittal for a vendor quote. And this was mostly intended so that we would have a more accurate cost basically for the vehicle or equipment. As for can you issue a PO? So an applicant can get a PO, a purchase order. The thing is that if a purchase order is already issued, it is their responsibility. So if they do not receive funding and they already have a purchase order in hand, it's at the risk of the applicant. Otherwise, the applicant can actually get a purchase order ahead of time. However, if they are stacking, just remember there are different requirements for different programs. So VW program might not have a limitation that says, it's at the risk of the applicant to obtain a PO before an executed agreement. Some other programs may state you cannot get a PO at all. So again, if you are stacking, it's good to find out the requirements for all programs involved.
Anonymous attendee is asking, should funds be oversubscribed, will a second round occur?
So right now, again, the VW program is first come, first served, so it will remain open until all funds have been allocated or fully exhausted. There is no specific intent right now, close and reopen the solicitation. However, if that does happen, we will make an announcement.
Okay. Lisa with Tom Truck Center is asking, how long does it take to get reimbursed upon submitting an invoice package?
Again, that completely depends on how complete the invoice package is. If the invoice package is fully complete, we will pay within 30 days from a complete application.
Part of this has already been asked, but Lisa with Tom Truck Center is asking, what is the definition of a third party? And I think what has not been asked is, what is the purpose of a third party?
Again, a third party consistent, they are just basically, we use them pretty much as an interchangeable term. Anyone who's assisting the applicant with an application can be considered as a third party. It could be, again, anyone, as long as it's not the actual applicant. Now, that is not to say that a third party is not, like let's say if it's a large entity and they have multiple staff working on an application, that is just considered the staff of the actual applicant. It's not considered a third party. A third party is somebody who's outside of that entity themselves. So again, like a consulting firm will be considered a third party.
I just want to add, just however, like when you sign your contract or your application, if it's a staff member, it will have to be an authorized person. Otherwise, there will have to be additional documentation provided before you submit your application.
Yes, thank you, Jesse.
Anonymous attendee is asking, can a fleet use a ZEVW funded vehicle to meet its ACF milestone requirements?
I would defer that question to CARB. There is nothing in the VW program stating that it cannot be used for ACF, as assuming that it's ahead of the requirements of the program itself. But that question would be better answered to CARB staff. So we could provide a link to the CARB website for that information if that would be helpful. But because this is anonymous, CARB's website can easily be accessible through Google. So if the anonymous attendee would like that information, please feel free to email us and we'd be more than happy to redirect you.
Anonymous attendee is asking, for determination of funds, did you say that it's the percentage or the set amount, whichever one of those is less or more?
It's always the lesser of the two. So for trucks in the in the combustion category, so for a replacement of truck, it's pretty much set at 25% or 102,000. The 25% is determined by the cost of the vehicle itself, including the taxes that are associated with it. So let's say for ease, it's a $100,000 truck. Obviously, you would not get the 102,000 because the actual cost of the vehicle exceeds that 102,000. So it would be at the 25% for that. Obviously, most trucks are not $100,000, but that was just an example as an easy rounded number.
Anonymous attendee is asking, does AQMD plan to fund ZE truck repowers in the future?
So the VW program is a statewide program, and the lead agency is actually CARB. Now, VW funds are cited specifically for this program, and it just happens to have a funding category for zero-emission trucks. Again, statewide, as in anybody within the state of California can apply as long as they operate at least 75% of the time in California. If you're specifically asking for funding from the South Coast AQMD for our programs, we have a variety of programs that are actually open or will be open. We have the Carl Moyer program, we have the VIP program, as well as other programs that fund the zero-emission trucks. So just to help kind of some of the confusion that comes in, again, the VW program is statewide. It's just that South Coast AQMD is the program administrator for these two funding categories.
Anonymous attendee is asking, do the VW funds have to be allocated by a certain time because of requirements from the VW settlement?
Yes. So as it stands, the VW program is seeking to meet its obligations by late 2027, 2028. So the funds do need to be obligated by that. So So again, it's already 2024, so the program is seeking for funds to be obligated before the 2027-2028 deadline.
Jeremy Osterd is asking, without a dealer applying for funds and end user being the applicant, who holds the bag until funds are reimbursed?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I will attempt to answer. So basically, the funds are held by either the trust or by South Coast AQMD before they go to the applicant. The Wilmington Trust holds the actual majority of funds before those funds are dispersed to the actual project administrators. And once they are distributed to the project administrators, such as South Coast AQMD, we will hold the funds and pay out the applicant once that invoice process is completed.
Another question from Jeremy. What is the estimated hold period for funds to be reimbursed after the customer's original vehicle is scrapped and new vehicle is paid for so it can be released?
Again, that completely depends on when the applicant submits an invoice to us. If the applicant is able to move quickly, we will also be able to move quickly.
And a question from anonymous attendee. As long as the replacement unit meets the requirements, it doesn't matter if the truck is new or used, correct?
No, the trucks do need to be brand new, unregistered. That is the requirement for the program, is that used vehicles are not eligible as the replacement.
And that's our last question.
Okay, so let me just stop the share for a bit and see, do we have any raised hands? Okay, I don't see any raised hands. Okay. So the webinar was intended for an hour long, so we do have about 15 more minutes. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we can end this webinar a bit early. Again, just wanted to thank everybody for attending today, and also we are available for questions. Please feel free to call us or email us. For anyone who has any specific scenarios, again, please feel free to reach out to us. And again, to the anonymous attendee, if you would like to email us, we'd be more than happy to redirect you to call. Okay, I do not see any raised hands and I don't see anyone else. Oh, there's one question. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Jamie is cap for funding based on various orders.
So there is no funding cap for the VW program under this current solicitation. As kind of previously mentioned, if an entity has, one truck or 100 trucks, it depends on how much they will like to request for funding. So there is no entity cap under the current solicitation. An applicant can apply to the amount based upon their need.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay. So we will give it one more minute and then we'll end the webinar. And again, the webinar recording and slides will be made available on our website before the end of next week. Oh, I see. I think I see
There's
questions.
two. There's two more. One from Jeremy. Can funding be held for lead times?
So, Jeremy, can you help clarify the question? feel free to like just raise your hand or.
Yeah, because he was asking if so, for how long.
Okay.
So,
So,
in the, oh, okay, there we go. Jeremy's hand is raised.
Hello.
hello.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, like, because for example, HVIP, a lot of times, sometimes these trucks aren't just readily available on the lot, and we're relying on the manufacturer to build. And if there's a lead time of, say, I know with HVIP, they actually allow us to go out a year and even extend it out to 18 months of particular builds. Once we get a voucher secured, the funding's kind of set aside for the project. Is this just more geared towards vehicles available on the lot right now in stock? Or is there lead times available for trucks? Like, let's say I have a hydrogen truck with a hydrogen fuel cell. That truck could take, 30 to maybe even up to 6 months to complete the build for delivery.
Yes. So that's what we have an in-service period. So right now it's about 12 months. Again, that can be extended, obviously, if there are manufacturer delays. It doesn't have to be equipment that's already on a lot or available. We do understand that oftentimes, it will depend on the availability of the equipment itself. So once your application is in and you have been awarded funding and basically have an executed agreement, the funds are set aside. So those funds are reserved for that project and will not be moved to another project unless obviously the applicant withdraws.
And then at which point do we scrap the old vehicle? Is there like a point where you say, okay, our truck's going to is physically here, then you have us scrap the old vehicle?
So generally speaking, most people will scrap for trucks after they receive the new equipment. So kind of it's like a swap off, right?
Okay.
Now, can people scrap early? Potentially, yes. You will have to let us know, but do not destroy the equipment before the inspections have already taken place.
And then last question is, after the new vehicles there ready to be delivered and the old vehicles scrapped, it sounds like there's a period where the customer will have to pay for the truck until they're reimbursed since they're the applicant.
Correct. So, and that has to do with the VW program by reimbursement, payment via reimbursement and not via voucher system. So payment occurs afterwards. Generally speaking, our understanding is the process is different for different applicants. Some applicants will pay the amount just upfront for the vehicle. Some people will have it financed. Some people have other procedures that they go through.
So a customer really could finance the vehicle, and then once they get reimbursed, they could put that cash in their bank and just keep paying the finance payments.
Generally speaking, what occurs is that we prefer to either pay the dealership or we prefer to pay the finance institution for that amount. Because again, the funding is intended to go into the replacement or repower of the vehicles themselves. For applicants who do end up paying upfront for the entire cost, they can easily request for us to pay them directly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Next question is from anonymous attendee. What are the eligible project categories for this round?
Sorry. Okay, so that is a fairly broad question, and let's see. Let me hold on a second. Give me an opportunity to share my screen again. And let's see. Okay. So as you can see, for the combustion category, the existing eligible equipment are Class 7 and Class 8 freight trucks, dump trucks, waste haulers, and concrete mixers for the trucks category. And for marine, it's ferries, tugboats, and towboats. And for the locomotives, it's just straight up freight switcher locomotives. So that is the combustion freight and marine category. These are the eligible equipment types. For the zero-emission Class 8 trucks category, the only eligible equipment type is Class 8 freight trucks, drayage trucks, dump trucks, waste haulers, and concrete mixers.
Okay. And next question is from Jamie. Are vehicles available for funding that arrived but have not been put in service?
So again, this was a point that we wanted to reinforce. If you've already taken delivery of the equipment without an executed agreement in place, there is no obligation for South Coast AQMD to fund those equipment. So again, it's very important that vehicles that have already been delivered or that have already been taken possession of, they need to already have an executed agreement in place.
And we're done with questions.
Okay. Okay, so let's give it another minute to see if more questions will come in. And again, after this webinar, if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Oh,
We have another question from Allison Wertz. From the administrator perspective, what makes for a competitive application?
so for the VW program, the applications are first come, first served. This is not a competitive solicitation. Priority is currently given to marine and rail projects, especially those which are very cost effective and provide a lot of NOx emission reductions. However, again, these are first come, first served solicitations. As it stands right now, applications are awarded based upon when the application is submitted.
And that was our last question.
Okay. So again, everyone, we have about 5 minutes left to the webinar. If you have a question, please feel free to ask, or again, feel free to ask us via email or phone. If we don't see a question pop up, we will end the webinar slightly early. Okay, so I do not see any more questions popping up. Okay, so again, want to thank everyone for joining us today. And that will pretty much conclude our webinar for the solicitation that's currently open for the VW program. Again, that's going to be the combustion freighter marine and zero-emission Class A truck. All right, so I will wish everyone a wonderful day. And that concludes our webinar. Again, thank you for attending.